So, a very warm welcome to Sarah Alder. Is it Alder or Alder? I should have
Alder,
asked.
yeah.
Alder, thank you.
Mhm.
So, thank you so much for taking your precious time out to be with me today and all of us. Sarah is a Family Mealtimes Mentor, and she helps parents transform mealtimes from stressful to stress-free. And I'm sure every mum watching this can relate to that. She specialises with working with parents on the practical aspects of mealtimes, from fussy eater issues to saving time, energy, money, and waste in the kitchen. And what I love is, because I've been following you on social media, I love how you kind of post your what you've done each week with your menus, and I think that's great because I think it kind of gives people so many options and different choices. When I know that when my daughter was younger and she only ate like a handful of things, it would be, oh my goodness, what am I going to make now? And what I'd do is I'd make the same meal over and over until she got bored of it, and then I'd run out of ideas. I'm sure you're nodding your head. It sounds like you know this one. So why is it that parents find mealtime so stressful?
Yeah, so well, first of all, thanks for having me. Several reasons. One of them is because of time constraints. We're all so busy. When I was growing up, mum was at home with us full time. There was time to cook. There was time to think about what we were going to eat. There was time to prepare things throughout the day together. But, so many of us now are working mums. And then added to that are the pressures of after school clubs and swimming and goodness only knows what else. And coming home from school late, coming home from work late, and then still having to get dinner on the table. Add to that the stress that we get from children, as you said, refusing foods or refusing to eat anything but a few foods. So that food refusal or fussy eating, I don't like the term fussy eating, though it's well recognized. And then we're worrying about how much food is going to waste, both the environmental and the budget impact of that. Yeah, so we're worrying then if our children aren't eating about whether they're getting the right nutrition, whether they're eating enough, and they've been eating enough of the right foods, and it just compounds on us. Throw into that now the cost of living crisis, and the stress is endless.
Well, I just feel quite stressed listening to all of that. It's quite overwhelming. Yeah, so so it's really interesting how you've broken it down. So it really is, it's the busy mum who literally has too much to do, too many things to do in the hours of the day, compounded by the child who doesn't necessarily want to eat what the mum's made. And then, I guess, the current world situation that we're in, turbulent times and all that. And then, money, it all costs so much and food wasted. So
And I think there's a social kind of expectation as well that is placed
yeah.
on this. And I should say, it's not just mums. I know there are dads out there working extremely hard. It just so happens that mostly I work with mums, and they are mostly the ones thrown into all of this.
Yes, yes. And I'm also curious, like, why do you think it is that children do get picky? Like, okay, we're not going to use the word fussy now. So, are selective, or they don't want to eat necessarily what mum or dad's made.
Yeah, so it's natural childhood developmental behaviour, and it stems back to the caveman days when we were learning to go out hunter gathering, and it was a way to keep us safe and knowing which foods to eat by recognising that bright coloured foods that were soft, were not only going to be nutritionally packed, they were going to be easy to eat, but they were going to be probably sweet and therefore safe to eat. Anything that was green, that had a bitter taste to it, was going to be dangerous, potentially poisonous for us. And we haven't evolved from that process. So we're around about 18 months 2-3 years, this period of food refusal comes about for most children, and really how we deal with it does impact then on how severe it gets and how prolonged it is. But it is a safety mechanism, because at that age, the children are becoming more independent. They are learning to feed themselves, albeit now, that food is safe. It's given to us by our parents, but it all stems back from keeping us safe in those cavemen.
Wow.
It's a fascinating history.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's also why then that children now still have that preference for sweeter foods, for softer foods that are easy to eat, because they can take on the calories really quickly and know that they're safe.
Wow. So so that means that, so how did we get over the fact that, because some green foods are obviously really nutritious, but they are bitter. So how did we then go on to be okay with them?
Yeah, so as we evolve, we learn what safe farming methods came in rather than hunter gathering. So we worked out from there what was going to be safe to eat. Nonetheless, never mind it still being bitter, but it's why we need to keep on offering those foods. It's why green vegetables in particular are so hard for us to get our children to eat in general, and it's why we have to offer a wide variety of those foods right from early weaning stages. Quite often we'll start out with sweet foods, apple purees, carrot or purees, but actually what we need to be doing in those first tastes is having those bitter foods so that they become more easily accepted as children grow.
How fascinating. I wish I'd have known all that, back when my daughter was little. So mums and dads come to you, and I guess they're kind of pulling their hair out. What are the things that stress them out most?
Mostly it's having to cook 3 different meals every night, if not more, wanting to eat just one meal as a whole family, but being convinced that that's never going to happen. Yeah, worried about trying to get children to eat vegetables. Yeah, mostly just children not eating, and being really concerned over the nutrition and whether they are getting enough. And in particular at dinner times, where they're seeing children barely touch a meal. And actually, again, that's quite normal behaviour, because children, unlike what we've learned as adults to have our main meal of the day at the end of the day, children naturally front load their day. So eat much more at breakfast time, and then by dinner time, actually, a few mouthfuls is enough. Whereas we are so stressed and anxious about the fact they've only eaten a couple of mouthfuls, and are they going to sleep through the night? Are they going to wake up hungry? Are they going to starve at night? All of these things are playing over in our minds, whereas actually, usually a few mouthfuls is enough, and allowing the child to listen to their bodies as to what they need is a really good approach.
I'm just writing down some of the things you said, because it's all really interesting. And I think so as mums, we worry about our children, worry about them not being well enough, not being healthy, not having enough energy. And I think also often, like, there can be this thing of like, if I can't get my child to eat, I've kind of failed as a mum. I don't know if you...
Food is love, isn't it? And either we feel like we failed because they're not eating, or they're not eating what we deem to be the right kinds of foods, or we take it personally as like a stab in the heart, isn't it?
Yeah.
My child is rejecting me rather than rejecting the food.
Oh yes, absolutely. That's so good. I mean, not good, but I think you've really nailed it there.
Yeah, there's so much guilt piled on us, isn't there, as mums, and mealtimes are no exception.
Yeah. And often it can also come down to how, the mum has experienced what her relationship with food is like. So, for example, if she's very overweight, she might be concerned that the children, I mean, sometimes they might be worried that children overeat, or she might, or if she's had like a bad experience with food as she was growing up in some way, maybe she also had, food forced to her. So she might then be very liberal with her food, but realize that the child isn't getting anything. So all our own experiences from us receiving food as a child and how our parents were with us is then going to impact how we then parent our own children with food.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes there can be a conflict as well between partners, because we may recognize that that is our experience and want to try and change that for that experience for our children. A partner might not have recognized that and be perpetuating those: you need to clear your plate, you have to eat your vegetables to get your pudding, all of those things which go towards developing a negative relationship with food rather than a positive one. And then that conflict can arise because two different parenting styles, I suppose, isn't it? And then that's stressful for the child. That conflict is confusing for the child as well. And also, any past experiences with food, we do bring that to the table with us, and that even subconsciously that stress is there, and children pick up on that stress, which just adds again to their own stresses about the discomfort and the scariness that food can have.
Okay, so I think we have got so much material here to tap on. It's absolutely brilliant. I think you've brought up such interesting things. So for those of you watching, if you haven't done EFT before, it stands for Emotional Freedom Techniques. It's like acupuncture for emotions without the use of needles. And the invitation is simply to do what we do and say what we say. And if you don't like what we do or say, then simply don't do it. But if you do tap along with us, you agree to take responsibility for your own well-being. So what I'd like you to do, and Sarah, you can do this too. I mean, you could, if you wouldn't mind being my echo, that would be amazing. Thank you. So, and if anyone watching has any comments about how food bothers their family, then you can type it in the comments as well, and we'll try and feed that in. So when you think about your relationship with meal times, with your child at meal times, I want you to assess that relationship, how you feel about that relationship, on a scale from -10 through 0 to +10, where -10, when I think about dinner time, I just feel the worst ever. When I think about dinner time, I feel quite neutral, or +10. Meal times are just the best time for love and connection, and I love spending time with my child. So just notice where you are on that scale. And then what I encourage you to do is notice what the feeling is, what the emotion is when you think about meal times. So I'm guessing there's going to be stress, anxiety, I guess.
Dread.
You can chip in dread, thank you, dread. Sorry?
Fear. Avoidance. I suppose that's not an emotion, is it?
But that's okay. Avoidance. Also probably pressure. I don't think that's an emotion. It's like the pressure to try and get it right this time.
Anxiety.
Yeah. Okay. So if anything else, if we think of anything else, we can feed that in while we're going. So notice for you how that feels in your body when you think about your emotion that you're feeling. Notice how it feels. Notice where you feel it in your body. Notice the body sensation. So it could be, when I think about this, I'm feeling stressed in my shoulders and my shoulders are burning. So just notice what's there. And if you don't know, just make it up. And then notice if that sensation in your body had a color, what color that would be. And again, if you don't know, just make it up. And based on that, we're just going to do some tapping. So
I'm going to picture myself several years ago when this was an issue for me, because and put myself in the shoes of my clients, I suppose, when we're tapping through this.
That's really beautiful. And you know something, you know what you can do? You can actually, because that version of you back then was probably feeling all the feelings that we're talking about. And you can tap on that younger you. So it's quite, in tapping, you can actually tap to almost heal that version of you that was like struggling so much. So even though you've overcome it, if when you think about that younger you, that version of you with the little children, that there's anything coming up, you can kind of reassure her. So you could do it like that if it feels right.
Yeah, that's nice.
So yeah, so noticing those feelings, and we're going to do some tapping. So if you wouldn't mind repeating after me, and if you think of anything that can be tweaked or changed, just feed it in. So even though when I think about mealtimes, I feel stressed and anxious, and there's a sense of dread and fear, and I just want to avoid it, and I have all this pressure to get it right. I acknowledge what's there for me, and I'm open to the possibility of creating a new relationship with mealtimes. And tapping through the points, starting with the top of the head. I have to sometimes cook several different meals. And I want one meal for the whole family. And when my children don't eat, I worry about their nutrition. And sometimes they don't even touch their food. And that makes me feel so anxious. Are they going to sleep through the night? Are they going to be hungry? So we're just under the arm now. And sometimes I feel like I've failed as a mum. It feels like a stab in the heart. It feels like they're rejecting me. When they reject their food. Because food is like love. And it makes me feel so guilty. And I'm acknowledging any conflict that I have with my partner around this. And I acknowledge all my feelings and beliefs. That I learnt from my parents about food. And I acknowledge my relationship with food. And any unconstructive habits I may have. All of this stress. And anxiety. And dread. And fear. And avoidance. The pressure of trying to get it right.
Frustration, I think, of trying to do it right.
The frustration. And sometimes I get so frustrated. That I lose it with my children. And then feel guilty. And I wonder how that makes them feel about food and mealtimes. And thinking about that makes me feel even more guilty. And I'm trying so hard. And it's just not working. Thank goodness for people like Sarah. And I just need a solution.
I just need a solution.
I'm trying so hard to get it right.
I'm trying so hard to get it right.
And I'm noticing how that feels in my body.
And I'm noticing how that feels in my body.
And I'm open to the possibility.
And I'm open to the possibility.
Of having compassion for myself.
Of having compassion for myself.
With all of these mealtime problems.
With all of these mealtime problems.
I'm doing the best I can.
I'm doing the best I can.
And there are things I'm doing well.
There are things that I am doing well.
And this one's difficult.
And this one's difficult.
And that's okay.
And that's okay.
So I'm open to the possibility.
So I'm open to the possibility.
Of having even more compassion for myself.
Of having even more compassion for myself.
And this situation.
And this situation.
I can't change my children.
I can't change my children.
I can invite them to change.
I can invite them to change.
But I can change myself.
But I can change myself.
And being stressed about mealtimes.
And being stressed about mealtimes.
Isn't helping me.
Isn't helping me.
And it isn't helping them.
And it isn't helping them.
So I'm open to the possibility.
So I'm open to the possibility.
Of knowing and trusting.
Of knowing and trusting.
That there are parts of me.
That there are parts of me.
That know how to do this.
That know how to do this.
The calmer parts.
The calmer parts.
The parts of me that know how to think clearly.
The parts of me that know how to think clearly.
Those parts that get squashed by the stress.
Those parts that get squashed by the stress.
So I'm open to the possibility.
So I'm open to the possibility.
Of infusing into my mealtimes.
Of infusing into my mealtimes.
Calm thinking.
Calm thinking.
Relaxed focus.
Relaxed focus.
Releasing attachment to the outcome.
Releasing attachment to the outcome.
Doing my best is good enough.
Doing my best is good enough.
Even if sometimes I tell myself it isn't.
Even if sometimes I tell myself it isn't.
In those moments, I'm not being very compassionate to myself.
In those moments, I'm not being compassionate to myself.
And if my best friend had the struggles I'm having.
And if my best friend had the struggles I'm having.
I wouldn't be mean to her as I am to myself.
I wouldn't be mean to her as I am being to myself.
So maybe I can find a kinder relationship with myself.
So maybe I can find a kinder relationship with myself.
Knowing and trusting that I'm on a journey to improving this situation.
Knowing and trusting that I'm on a journey to improving the situation.
And sometimes it will go right.
And sometimes it will go right.
And sometimes it won't.
Sometimes it won't.
And that's just the nature of life.
And that's just the nature of life.
So I'm open to the possibility.
So I'm open to the possibility.
Of infusing into my mealtimes.
Of infusing into my mealtimes.
Easy creativity.
Easy creativity.
Relaxation. Sorry?
Joy.
Joy, thank you. And joy. And an abundance of joy.
And an abundance of joy.
And fun.
And fun.
And ease.
And ease.
And peace.
And peace.
And flow.
And flow.
And knowing and trusting.
And knowing and trusting.
That however the mealtimes. It's not a reflection.
It's not a reflection.
of how good a mum I am.
Of how good a mum I am.
Because the fact that I'm watching this and tapping.
Because the fact that I'm watching this and tapping.
Shows that I care.
Shows that I care.
And that's all there is to it.
And that's all there is to it.
So infusing even more.
Infusing even more.
Joy and fun.
Joy and fun.
Into my next meal with my children.
Into my next meal with my children.
And I'm open to the possibility.
And I'm open to the possibility.
Of being unexpectedly surprised.
Of being unexpectedly surprised.
At how delightfully it flows.
At how delightfully it flows.
And just put your hands on your heart chakra, center of the chest, say transform, and take a deep breath. So having done that, one of three things will have happened. Either the intensity will have that. So when you think about meal times now, on a scale from -10 through 0 to +10, it might have stayed the same. It might have gone down. You might feel worse about your meal times, or you might feel better about your meal times. Now, obviously, we're hoping that you feel better about your meal times. But if you feel worse, it just simply means that you've sat here with us and you focused on all the reasons why meal times aren't going well, and it's brought it up to your conscious awareness. And it means that you're focusing on it, whereas before you weren't, because you were probably rushing around. But if you now repeat this tapping, it will start reducing. Now, if it's stayed the same and there's been no change, you can try doing the tapping again. But also do feed in the comment, because there's loads of things that can help you if it hasn't changed. It's just beyond what I can offer in this video. But I can support you if you tell me exactly what happened. So other things that could happen is you might feel lighter from the tapping, you might feel more energized, you might feel more tired, or you might have tingling, you might notice that you've been yawning or burping, and it's great to have a glass of water because tapping does bring to the surface stresses that need to be released, so it's very good to drink. So I know you weren't really, and there's a good yawn there as well.
I always yawn when I tap.
Me too. I always yawn. I mean, not when I'm facilitating, but when I'm tapping for myself, I
The
yawn.
lady I learned tapping off, she burps all the time during her teaching. It's hilarious. So when she got over that embarrassed, oh my goodness, shocked.
Yeah, burping's part of it, sighing. So all that is signs that the energy is moving and that EFT is working. So I know that for you, it's not an issue for you right now, but it was back then. I wondered if you feel any different or any thoughts come to mind or feelings.
Yeah, I feel much lighter, actually. I always do feel lighter when I've tapped, and I get the tingliness in my fingers as well. I always feel thirsty after a tap, but yeah, it's not necessarily a problem for me still, but it's still an ongoing process with my youngest. So, meal times aren't always joy. We do have stressful meal times, but that acceptance that, even once you come out the other side, there are going to be meal times that don't go your way, that don't go to plan. I'm just, putting a close on it and moving on, maybe tapping on that meal time. And then, the next meal time is a completely different experience, isn't it? And you start from a fresh table.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, I think that was brilliant. Thank you so much. And just to say, like, my daughter's now, she's 22, and mealtimes used to be very challenging. She was, she didn't eat much. And now, I don't know how it happened, but she is vegan. So within vegan, she eats pretty much everything, and she's become an amazing cook as well. So I love it when she actually cooks. So there is kind of rays of hope at the end of the tunnel for those of you who are struggling.
So many of us were fussy as children or had food refusal, but we do grow up to be fully functioning adults, and on the whole eat a good variety of foods, and that there is hope for everybody. Some people eat more foods than others. Some people do have strong likes and dislikes, and that's okay. But yeah, it's not something that's there for life for the majority of people.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much. Just to repeat, Sarah is a Mealtimes family mentor, and you've got something coming up this week. So do you want to share, or next week, what your event is?
Yes, so I'm running a masterclass next Thursday evening. So that's the 24th of November, and it's at 8 o'clock, helping your fussy eater develop a love of food. And we're going to look at in more detail about why children refuse food and how that comes about, how that makes us feel, how the experiences we go through, and then some really practical tips and approaches that we can take to transform those meal times.
Absolutely fantastic. I'm sure it's going to be a massive success. So, and we're going to put the link to your, and do you want to say that your website for anyone who wants to know how to?
So my website is kitchentitbits.co.uk, and you can book your place on my website. You just go to the events tab and you can book a place there. And you can find me on social media as Kitchen Titbits.
Kitchen Titbits, fantastic. Sarah, thank you so much for being here. This has been absolutely fantastic. And if you have enjoyed watching this with Sarah and I, then please do hit the share button. I'm sure lots of other mums out there could really benefit from support with mealtimes. So thank you for that as well. Okay, so I will see you all soon at the next interview. Bye.